Snow came down in wide, patient flakes, the kind that softened sound and swallowed the sharp edges of the world. The streetlight above the bus stop glowed amber through the white, flickering as if unsure it wanted to stay awake. Elena Moore stood beneath it with her shoulders drawn inward, hands tucked deep into the pockets of a worn coat that no longer remembered warmth. The cold pressed against her skin, but it was familiar. Loss had taught her how to stand very still inside discomfort. The shelter door across the street closed with a careful click. Not slammed. Not cruel. Just final. A woman inside had shaken her head apologetically, lips forming words Elena already knew. Full for the night. Maybe tomorrow. The kindness in the refusal hurt more than anger would have. Elena nodded, murmured thanks, and stepped back into the snow as if returning to a place she belonged. She moved to the bench at the bus stop, brushing snow away before sitting. The scarf around her neck was pulled high, wool rough against her chin. It had been his. She didn't think his name anymore. Thinking it felt like reopening a door she had barely learned how to close. Her fingers found the faint pale circle on her left hand, the skin where a ring had once rested, and she pressed there until sensation returned. Across the street, a dark car idled with its headlights dimmed. Adrian Cross sat behind the wheel, gloved hands resting on the steering column, unmoving. He had been there longer than he intended, watching snow collect on the curb, watching people pass without looking at one another. The city felt emptied tonight, like a room after a conversation had ended. He didn't want to go home to a house that echoed when he breathed. When the shelter door closed and Elena stepped back into the cold, something shifted. Adrian's gaze followed her, not curious, not predatory, just attentive. She did not cry. She did not rush. She absorbed the rejection with a dignity that felt heavier than grief. He watched her sit, watched the snow settle into her dark hair, and felt a tightness he didn't name. He turned off the engine. The sudden silence felt deliberate. His footsteps sounded too loud on the pavement. Elena sensed someone before she saw him, the way you sense weather changing. She lifted her eyes. The man approaching wore a dark coat, unsnowed despite the storm, leather gloves pale against the night. He stopped several steps away, leaving space between them like an offering. "I'm sorry," he said first, voice low, careful. Elena studied him. His face held no urgency, no charm. Only steadiness. "For what?" she asked. "For the night being like this," he said. "And for them turning you away." She nodded once. The wind tugged at her scarf. "It happens." Adrian hesitated, then did something small and irreversible. He pulled off one glove and extended it toward her, palm up, empty. "You look cold." "I'm fine," she said automatically, then stopped. After a breath, she reached out. Her fingers brushed his skin before closing around the glove. The leather was soft, lined with fleece. Warmth spread too quickly. "My name is Adrian," he said. "Elena." They stood like that, snow thickening, time loosening its grip. "I'm not offering charity," Adrian said. "It creates debts where there shouldn't be any." He paused. "What I'm about to say will sound strange." Elena met his eyes. There was weariness there, but also resolve. "Go on." "I need a wife," he said quietly. "And you need a husband." The sentence settled between them, heavy and calm. Elena laughed once, a short sound without humor. Snow gathered on her lashes. "You don't know me." "No," Adrian agreed. "But I know what it looks like when someone has no place to go. And I know what it's like to have a house that doesn't feel like one." Silence stretched, full of calculations. Elena looked down at the glove in her hands, at the way her fingers no longer shook. She imagined warmth that lasted longer than an hour, imagined refusing and walking until morning broke her resolve. When she looked up again, Adrian was still there, not closer, not retreating. "I'm not promising love," he added. "Only shelter. Safety. And honesty." Elena stood slowly, the bench creaking behind her. She handed the glove back, then surprised them both by keeping his hand, just for a moment. "I'll come inside," she said. "But I haven't agreed to anything else." Adrian nodded, relief flickering and then steadying. He gestured toward the car. As they crossed the street together, snow filling their footprints as fast as they made them, Elena glanced once over her shoulder at the empty bus stop, the place she might have stayed, before the light above it flickered and went dark. The darkness did not frighten her as much as she expected. It felt like a door closing gently behind her, not locking, just ending something that had already grown thin. Snow brushed her face as she stepped closer to the car, closer to a man she did not know, carrying a future she could not yet imagine. The cold lingered, but it no longer owned her. Somewhere inside that silence, a fragile, dangerous possibility began to breathe. And she let it, despite fear. Still trembling, Elena woke before dawn, not from sound, but from the awareness of warmth pressing where cold had lived too long. For a moment she did not move, afraid the sensation would vanish if acknowledged. The room was dim, curtains drawn, a single lamp left on low near the door. The air smelled faintly of cedar and clean linen. Snowlight leaked around the edges of the window like a held breath. She sat up slowly, the borrowed blanket sliding from her shoulders. It was heavier than her own had ever been, stitched with quiet care. Her boots were lined neatly beside the bed, dried and upright. Someone had paid attention to them. The thought settled in her chest with an unfamiliar tenderness. Outside the room, the house spoke in muted sounds. A kettle beginning to murmur, a floorboard sighing under careful weight. Elena followed the noise, pausing at the doorway when she saw him. Adrian stood at the counter, sleeves rolled, movements economical and unhurried. Steam rose from a mug cradled between his hands. He did not turn immediately, as if giving her time to decide whether to step forward. "You're awake," he said gently when she did. "I didn't mean to intrude," Elena replied, her voice rough with sleep. "You didn't," he said. "You're here." The words were simple, but they landed with intention. He set the mug down and gestured to the chair across from him. She hesitated, then sat. The chair was warm, recently used. The warmth startled her again. Adrian poured tea into a second cup, sliding it toward her without ceremony. The liquid was pale gold, steam fogging her glasses. She wrapped her hands around it, feeling heat bloom into her palms. Neither of them spoke. Silence filled the kitchen, not empty, just waiting. A small figure appeared in the doorway, socked feet barely making a sound. The boy stood there clutching a folded paper star, edges softened by use. His eyes were wide, curious but calm. Elena stiffened instinctively, unsure where she belonged in this new frame. "Noah," Adrian said softly, not reproachful. "This is Elena." Noah nodded solemnly. He crossed the room and placed the star on the table between them, pushing it toward Elena with 2 fingers. "So the house won't feel lonely," he said, then retreated without waiting for an answer. Something loosened behind Elena's ribs. She swallowed, blinking fast, and closed her hand around the star. It was warm from his pocket. "Thank you," she whispered to the empty doorway. Adrian watched her, something like relief passing over his face. "He does that," he said. "Gives things when he thinks they're needed." She smiled faintly. "He's kind." "Yes," Adrian agreed. He paused. "So are you." The morning unfolded in small motions. Toast browned. Butter melted. Elena moved without being asked, wiping the counter, aligning cups. It felt natural, dangerous in its familiarity. Outside, snow continued to fall, but thinner now, more decorative than cruel. Adrian spoke little, but when he did it was precise. He asked if she preferred sugar, if the light bothered her eyes, if silence felt heavy or helpful. Elena answered honestly, surprised by the ease of it. Each question felt like a door left unlocked rather than forced open. After breakfast, Adrian showed her the room she could use properly, not the guest space she had slept in. "Stay as long as you need," he said. "We can talk later." Elena nodded, though later felt undefined, suspended. She unpacked little, folding her scarf and placing it on the dresser with care. The fabric still held a memory of another life, another promise. She did not hide it, but she did not cling. Through the window she watched Adrian leave with Noah, gloved hand guiding the small shoulder. The boy turned once to wave, serious about it. Elena raised her hand in return. The door closed. The house quieted again, but it did not feel hollow. It felt like a room waiting to be spoken in. Hours passed. Light shifted from silver to pale gold. Elena found his gloves drying by the heater, and moved them closer, thoughtful. She straightened a picture frame, then stopped, unsure if that crossed an invisible line. The uncertainty stayed with her, gentle but persistent. She wondered what agreement truly meant. Shelter was simple. Belonging was not. The word wife hovered unspoken, heavier than snow, carrying expectation and risk. Elena pressed her palm to the window, feeling cold through glass, reminding herself she could still choose, still leave, still protect her heart if needed, even as hope whispered dangerously close. The day felt like borrowed time, delicate and conditional, balanced between gratitude and fear. Between staying silent and asking for clarity, she was not ready to hear yet. When they returned, snow clung to their coats, laughter puffing white in the entryway. Noah showed her a drawing of 3 figures beneath falling stars. Adrian met her eyes across the room, a question there. She answered with a nod she hadn't planned. That evening, as dusk thickened the windows, Adrian stood beside her, both watching the snow begin again. "About what I said," he started, voice not rehearsed. Elena held the paper star tighter. "We don't have to decide tonight," she said. Outside, the bus stop light flickered faintly in the distance, visible from the window, and neither of them looked away from it. Morning arrived quietly, as if afraid of waking the things that had finally learned to rest. Pale light slipped through the kitchen window and settled on the table where 2 cups sat untouched, yesterday's warmth gone, but its memory lingering. Elena stood barefoot on the cool floor, holding her scarf loosely, watching steam rise from the kettle as if it carried questions with it. Adrian moved nearby, slower than usual, his presence careful, as though the air between them had become something fragile. They spoke at last without ceremony. It happened while he sliced bread, the knife tapping softly against wood. "You don't have to explain anything," he said, not looking at her. "But you can if it helps." His voice held no demand, only space. Elena considered the window, the faint outline of snow melting along the sill. "I was married for 3 years, she said. The words surprised her with their steadiness. "We thought time would be generous." She paused, feeling the truth of that sentence settle. "It wasn't." Adrian stopped cutting. He waited, hands resting flat on the counter, as if grounding himself. Elena continued, speaking calmly, almost distantly, the way one speaks of weather that has already passed. She described illness without naming it, described holding a hand that grew lighter, described the quiet after. No tears came. She had cried them elsewhere, earlier, until crying became something private and done. "I learned how to survive," she finished. "Not how to begin again." Adrian nodded once. "My mother died when Noah was 4, he said. "The house forgot how to breathe after that." He glanced toward the hallway, where a small nightlight still glowed faintly. "I filled it with order instead. It was easier than grief." They stood in that shared admission, neither reaching for the other, yet closer than they had been moments before. The kettle clicked off. Adrian poured water, the sound deliberate, grounding. Elena wrapped her hands around the cup he offered, warmth blooming again. For a while, the day unfolded gently. Noah built towers on the rug, narrating softly to himself. Adrian answered emails at the table, glancing up often. Elena folded laundry, careful with each item, as if learning the weight of belonging by touch. The house felt balanced, suspended between what was and what might be. The shift came quietly. A phone call. Adrian stepped into the adjoining room, voice low, professional. Elena did not mean to listen, but words drifted through the open doorway, sharp in their clarity. "It's temporary," he said. "A practical arrangement. I won't let it affect the company." Temporary. Practical. Arrangement. The words landed like snow sliding from a roof, sudden and cold. Elena's hands stilled in the fabric she held. She told herself she had misunderstood, that context mattered, that fear liked to invent meanings. Still, something retreated inside her, instinctive and protective. When Adrian returned, she smiled because that was what she had practiced. He noticed anyway. He always noticed. "Are you all right?" he asked. "I am," she said. The truth was partial. She felt steadier saying less. That evening, the warmth thinned. Conversation stayed polite. Noah sensed it first, growing quieter, pressing closer to his father's side. Snow began again outside, heavier than before, flakes clinging stubbornly to glass. Elena watched it gather, remembering the bus stop light flickering beyond the street, remembering how choice could be as cold as solitude. Later, while Adrian washed dishes, Elena stood in the doorway, scarf in hand. "I think I should go for a walk," she said. "In this weather?" he asked, turning. "I won't be long." She stepped outside before he could answer. The cold met her like an old companion. Snow soaked into her boots as she walked, breath clouding. She did not know where she was going until she arrived. The bus stop waited, unchanged, bench dusted white, light humming softly. She sat, heart aching with familiarity. Behind her, footsteps approached, hurried this time. Adrian stopped a few feet away, snow collecting on his coat. "I didn't mean for you to hear that," he said. "And I didn't mean it the way it sounded." Elena looked up, eyes clear, guarded. "But it did sound," she replied. The snow fell between them, thick and unanswering. Adrian searched her face, understanding dawning too late. He had offered shelter without realizing how deeply she had begun to consider staying. Elena stood, scarf tightening around her neck, the paper star heavy in her pocket. The bus stop light flickered once, then steadied, as if waiting to see which of them would move first. Snow had softened to a gentle drift, pale flakes falling like whispered promises, when Elena stepped back into the quiet of the house. The faint glow from the street outside filtered through the frosted window, outlining her silhouette. Her scarf hung loosely around her neck, damp at the edges, carrying the scent of pine from the cold outside. Every step she took across the floorboards felt like a negotiation with herself, between fear and desire, between leaving and staying. She paused in the doorway, hands pressed lightly against the wood, listening. The house held its breath with her. Adrian appeared from the kitchen, a mug of tea cradled between both hands, steam curling upward like smoke from a distant fire. He did not rush to speak, nor did he attempt to reach across the space dividing them. He simply watched, letting her determine the terms of her return. There was no expectation, no rehearsed line. His presence alone was the invitation. When she finally lifted her gaze to meet his, the steady amber of his eyes reflected the streetlight outside. It was both question and reassurance, contained and patient. "I came back," Elena said softly, as if confirming to herself that the decision had been hers. Her words were deliberate, quiet, carrying both vulnerability and resolve. She folded her scarf and placed it gently on the table. It was no longer a shield but a relic, marking the end of one chapter and the tentative beginning of another. The paper star she carried in her coat pocket shifted against her palm, a small reminder of innocence and trust she had begun to accept. Adrian nodded, the corner of his lips curving, subtle but genuine. "I'm glad," he said. "There's no rush. No definitions tonight. Just this." His hand gestured to the space around them. The warm kitchen, the muted glow of lamps, the snow whispering against the glass. It was an offering without demand, and Elena felt the weight of its sincerity. She stepped further inside, the door closing softly behind her, the sound of punctuation that echoed with finality. Noah appeared almost immediately, tiny feet padding across the polished floor, eyes bright with curiosity and caution. He clutched another folded paper star, offering it to her with a solemnity that made her heart tighten. "For the house," he said, as if the walls themselves required reminders that warmth was now allowed. Elena accepted it, folding it into her hands like a promise. The boy's gaze lingered for a moment before he retreated into the living room, satisfied with his gesture. Adrian's shoulders shifted slightly, a silent acknowledgement of the bond forming in small, careful increments. They moved through the evening with a quiet rhythm, the kind that needs no overt declaration to convey intimacy. Adrian boiled water for tea again, letting the kettle's hum fill the gentle silences. Elena watched the way his hands worked. Precise, deliberate, yet unhurried. She poured sugar with the same attention, her fingers brushing briefly against his. Neither flinched. The contact was fleeting but sufficient to confirm the unspoken trust building between them. The conversation drifted naturally, unforced, touching lightly on trivialities before allowing more weight to seep in. Adrian spoke of small household routines he had kept in memory of his mother, the rituals that anchored him when the world outside had seemed too vast, too indifferent. Elena responded with stories of quiet grief she had carried alone, the moments of loss and love that had shaped her resilience. No dramatics, no pleas for understanding, simply recognition. Each story a reflection, each acknowledgement a step closer. The house, in turn, seemed to mirror their emotional journey. The living room lights softened the edges of furniture, casting shadows that flickered against the walls like tentative gestures. Outside, the snow light shimmered, no longer harsh but gentle, as if endorsing the reconciliation of hearts within. Elena moved closer to the window, watching the flakes drift lazily, imagining the streets below coated in white, untouchable and serene. She realized how much she had feared stillness, feared being alone, feared allowing herself to stay. But now the fear was tempered with trust. Adrian joined her, silent at first, hands folded behind his back. He did not crowd the space, did not ask for her attention. He simply stood as witness, letting the shared quietude speak. Elena turned to him, a flicker of a smile lighting her face. She did not speak, but her gaze conveyed recognition, acceptance, and a fragile hope that had begun to bloom despite the weight of past sorrow. Adrian mirrored it, eyes softening, chest unclenching, a release of tension neither fully admitted aloud. Later, the three of them gathered near the hearth. Adrian had lit a small fire, the flames dancing with amber and gold, reflecting on the walls and in the boy's wide eyes. Noah sprawled across the rug with his paper stars scattered around him, arranging them carefully as though crafting a constellation. Elena knelt beside him, guiding his hands, smiling softly at the concentration etched on his young face. Each movement was gentle, deliberate, a choreography of care that required no words. Adrian observed, hands folded, heart quietly swelling with the realization that home was no longer a place of empty rooms but of moments like this. Dinner unfolded with the same slow care. Elena moved with ease in the kitchen, tasting and adjusting flavors, Adrian offering quiet suggestions, and Noah chiming in with observations that made them all laugh softly. The house vibrated with warmth, not just from the stove or the fire but from connection. Shadows no longer felt cold, light no longer brittle. The snow outside continued its silent descent, but it no longer seemed like a barrier. Instead, it framed the domestic tranquility inside, painting the world in soft whites and golds. Afterward, Adrian carried mugs of cocoa to the living room. Elena and Noah sat together, sipping, their fingers brushing over the mugs in a natural, unspoken acknowledgement of shared space. Adrian watched from the doorway, content in the quiet observation of life moving gently, unforced. He took a seat nearby, leaving space between them, letting them lead the rhythm. There was no ceremony, no declaration, just the ease of presence, which often spoke louder than words. Night fell, soft and velvety. Snow continued to blanket the city, each flake catching the dim light from inside, reflecting amber tones that mirrored the warmth of the household. Elena finally set her scarf on the armchair beside her, no longer clutching it as a talisman against grief. She leaned back, exhaling softly, and let herself feel the stillness, the comfort, the belonging she had long denied herself. Adrian glanced at her, offering a small nod, a silent affirmation of their unspoken understanding. Noah yawned, curling up with a star clasped in his hands. Adrian rose to tuck him in, the movement slow, deliberate, almost ceremonious in its care. Elena watched them, heart unclenching further, recognizing that safety and affection need not be earned. They could be quietly given and quietly received. The room, filled with soft lamplight and the crackling of the hearth, hummed with domestic peace. Snow pressed against the windows, silent witness to the new rhythm of their lives. Before sleep, they stood near the window once more, watching snowflakes drift, catching them in their hands, letting them melt between fingers. No words were spoken. None were needed. The light reflected in their eyes, warm and steady, a promise more enduring than the storm outside. A fragile sense of permanence settled in the space between them, and Elena felt the last echoes of fear soften into hope. Adrian extended his hand slightly, and she did not hesitate this time, resting her palm in his with a quiet certainty. Noah placed a small paper star on the sill, marking the night. Outside, the snow continued its gentle descent, as if blessing the beginning of something tender, careful, and true. The house exhaled in harmony with their hearts, and for the first time in years, Elena felt like she belonged.